Good morning. Let's see. I'm sure people will trickle in, but I like to start things on time. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to have you here for our middle housing design competition, information session, and kickoff. My name is Amanda. I'm a lead planner with the City of Tucson Planning and Development Services Department. There's a number of other staff on this call, and we are going to help explain this competition, answer your questions about it, encourage your participation. This is being recorded and will be posted online to share, so you'll be able to share it with others who are interested and refer back to it later. So the reason we're here is that in June, the City of Tucson was awarded $25,000 from AARP to host a design competition and expand our model plan library with middle housing and design. So thank you, AARP, for the support. And like I said, we're going to be walking through a few things. We'll give some background on middle housing, talk about the benefits, how we got here, but then the majority of our time will be spending on the design competition, an overview, how you can participate, the design guidelines, and how you can submit your designs. We'll pause in between each of these three sections to answer any questions you have. Cesar will be monitoring the chat. Please put your questions into the chat at any time. We'll do everything we can within the time allowed, within the hour. And then if there's additional questions we haven't gotten to, we'll make sure to answer those. All of the questions you put in will be added to our website's FAQ so that we can all participate on this together. So thanks in advance for your questions. First, this might be obvious to most of us, but middle housing in Tucson is defined as anything with 2 to 4 housing units on a parcel. In some cases, it can be a site, but we'll talk about it in the context of a parcel. So that means, of course, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. One thing to note is that they can be attached or detached, which means you can have a single family residence and convert it into middle housing by adding a second unit. And of course, middle housing is very similar to ADU in function and the experience of the people living there, but they follow different zoning rules. And so I'll walk through some of that, but the website has a housing types guide that unpacks the differences between the zoning code for ADUs and middle housing. So I recommend looking into that if you haven't already explored the differences. Middle housing is a great benefit to our community for a variety of reasons. And that's why we're excited to have AARP's support to promote middle housing throughout the community, provide supplemental income, which also generates local economic stability, supports sustainable infill development, multimodal transportation. That in turn supports local businesses, retains neighborhood character because of the low density, and increases affordable housing, supports aging in place and multi-generational households by giving flexible housing options within a neighborhood. So as your needs change, you don't need to relocate necessarily, and promotes mixed income communities. So that's why Tucson passed a middle housing zoning code amendment that went into effect this January 1st of 2026. And there's a lot of details in that UDC amendment that are available on our website. So I'm just going to gloss over the main points of the change. But if you would like to dive in deeper into the zoning code amendment, there's a webinar on our website that talks through it all. I would highly recommend reviewing that if you haven't already. But the main points of what changed is that now middle housing is an allowed use in most zones throughout the city, except for rural residential. Anywhere where you could build 1 unit, you can now build up to 4. And the other big change, in my opinion, is that you can use the residential building code instead of the commercial building code for those units. Previously, the commercial building code kicked in at 3 units, and now it kicks in at 5. Privacy mitigation is required for any multi-story housing units that are adjacent to R2 or more restrictive. And we talk about a variety of ways in which you could achieve privacy mitigation, including a 10-foot setback and clerestory windows, a landscaping border. It's written in a fairly flexible way. The code reduced minimum lot size by 1,000 square feet, and side and rear setbacks are 5 feet. The front setback is still 20, but you can match the adjacent property up to 10 feet. So some neighborhoods that have closer setbacks were able to be flexible to match the context. There is a new landscaping requirement, so leaving space on your lot for trees and ground cover, as well as parking maximums in the front yard. In the front yard, you're limited to 2 spots and a 20-foot wide driveway. You can have as much parking elsewhere on the site as you would like. There's also parking waivers as an option if you want to reduce the amount of required parking if you're within a quarter mile of certain bike lanes and public transit, then you can apply for a parking waiver and reduce that parking requirement. Otherwise, all the other dimensional standards in the UDC still apply to middle housing. Even though it only went into effect 6 months ago or so, we've seen a lot of interest and a lot of support across the city. So it's really exciting to me and very much validates the decision ultimately to apply these changes citywide. We've seen middle housing permits in every ward, in every corner of the city, primarily in Ward 1. And they're mostly duplexes, as you can see in that chart, the green wedge. 91% are duplexes, which is somewhat to be expected since duplexes were allowed previously, but we are seeing additional traction in triplexes and quadruplexes. And so to further support middle housing implementation, this brings me back to the AARP grant and why we're here. We applied for and received the Community Challenge Grant to expand our model plan library, which was initially funded by AARP in 2023. And so if you were around in 2023 and participated in that competition, the process is very similar. You'll see some similarities in the design guidelines and the categories and our overall process, but we do have more funding for more prizes and we've added more categories. So that's really exciting. And our goal is to have 15 pre-approved plans in the library. So here's some pictures from the last time we did this, including the in-person feedback session, where you can see it's a great opportunity to get feedback on your designs. Also, participating allows you to meet and network and mingle with other architects and design professionals in the community. So these are some pretty fun events. And then it culminated with a competition celebration where we distribute the awards and we all eat good food and have a good time. So you can expect more of that this time. We've also seen that the library is fairly effective. Since 2024, 43 ADUs have been built using plans directly sourced from the model plan library. So we view that as a success, and there's no way of knowing how many people have connected to local builders and designers via the model plan library. I was actually, side note, I was on Reddit the other day and somebody had posted, I want to build a casita, how do I do it? And 2 or 3 different people said, you should see this library. So it's getting a lot of traction and a lot of visibility in the community. But you don't have to take my word for it. There are multiple people who participated who are happy to explain and speak to their experience. And I believe Logan is here with us today. Logan, if you are available and would like to speak on your behalf, go ahead and unmute. Thanks.
Yeah, happy to. We did we were advocates for the ADU code amendment. We did show up and we did give a lot of feedback for the process of passing the code. And when the ADU model plan library competition opened, I'm a designer and photographer. My partner is an architect, and we designed a unit to enter with the idea that we just wanted to make sure we had as many diverse quality designs in the library as possible. And we were one of the winners. We've had, by the end of this year, we'll have about 10 units built in the city. We self-built one of the units in our yard using the exact plan, exactly to plan, and that was recently published in Dwell magazine. So I think when we entered the competition, there wasn't a lot of information or infrastructure necessarily there. But what we've seen is a lot of through the process of receiving requests for like we want to use your plan. We started to build out a whole series of like documentation or information packets that we give to people to explain like how to get from the model plan library to this. And it's kind of automated the system to now where it's relatively easy to use. People come to us, they'll ask us about it. We have plenty of information. And then what we've seen is that a lot of people do go to the city and they say, I want to build an ADU. And the city also does say, hey, we've got this model plan library. This might be a place to look. So what we've seen is like a funneling of a lot of people towards us. We weren't intending to create a design studio, but we've ended up with a little bit of a design studio. And the result for us, like an incentive for architects or designers, is that when you design this one plan, you end up with 10 of them. You end up with about the same commission as you would for a single building, or with infinite potential to make money after that. But also, you just make it so that people can access quality design at a low price, which ends up benefiting our neighborhood. So we're really happy on our street. We have ours, and then down the street is another one, and down the street is another one. So on our bike path, on the bike boulevard, we're going to have three on one street going through most of the historic neighborhoods, which ends up feeling validating and sweet. And we've had a large variety of like a server at a restaurant wanting affordable housing for friends that are in between housing, to elderly parents supporting their parent, a couple supporting their elderly parent who needed housing. So it feels validating to see the people using it in a lot of variety of ways and redesigning the interiors or changing things how they see fit. But then overall getting to know that like you're improving access to individuals to have quality design in our communities.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. We also want to hear from Valerie and Urban Infill Project. Valerie, if you want to speak to your experiences after participating in the ADU competition.
Thanks. So we were involved, we were on the stakeholder group very early on when the city was just writing the first ADU, the first version of the ADU code. And we continue to see ourselves as partners with the city in the years after that, and how these codes are actually used, and how they work for homeowners. So we have a website where we have sort of a secondary library that is, the city links to our website directly from their library, and that's been very helpful, as well. We host designs that I did, and also are able to host designs done by other architects or designers. If sometimes the marketing or the interaction with homeowners feels a little arduous, we take care of that stuff. So we've basically standardized our process, to the point where it works really well for our customers. It works really well for us. We are able to charge a little bit lesser fee than we would for custom design. And then before this company and this zoning change, it could take 6 months, 8 months to get a building permit for somebody to build something like this. And so now with the new process with the city, we're able to get that timeline down to sometimes 4 to 6 weeks. And Logan mentioned historic neighborhoods, so it's nice. We still go through the same historic processes, which is comforting to the historic neighborhoods, and also we're able to use model plans to accommodate the needs of those processes as well. So, and we launched about 3 years ago, and we've sold 35 of those homes as of today. So, they're popping up all over. And like Logan said, there's several in my neighborhood and all over town. Sometimes I'm driving around and it feels like a little, where's Waldo? Oh, there's another one. There's another one, So, I think the most important part is that this is a very accessible option for homeowners who have a need. Pretty much all of our customers either have a young student that is graduating high school and is having trouble finding housing, but doesn't want to live at like under the same roof as mom and dad anymore. Also retired, aging parents. And so we have a couple of people that supplement the cost of the build by using short-term rentals, but that's like a very small percentage. We work with a couple of folks that I would call infill developers, incremental developers. These are small scale people that are involved in either the real estate or construction company. And we really think it's important to support a newer, like sort of upcoming pocket of developers that are local people, small businesses looking to do, again, infill projects. And so we've had a couple of those sorts of clients too that are just starting out with those business endeavors. So we really look at ourselves as an industry partner, partners to the city, and again, try very hard to standardize and offer the right kind of support to homeowners to make them feel really confident in the decisions they're making. So,
That's great.
yeah.
Thanks so much, Valerie and Logan for speaking up on behalf of the Model Plan Library. And while it's been a success, and also like it does feel good to see your own work out there in the community and accessible to people. And yeah, I just want to congratulate both of you on your successes as well. So I'll pause here if there are any questions in the chat, or if somebody wants to raise their hand and ask about, how we got here. And then I know you're all waiting for information about the design competition as well. So if there are no questions, we'll move on. Okay. Feel free to put your questions into the chat if they occur to you later. So next we'll go over the design competition at a high level, and then categories, the design guidelines, and how you will submit. So like last time, designers submit up to 3, and this year will be selected, and each of those designs will be awarded $1,000. And you instruction documents to create the pre-approved plan. And when you do so, the planner fees will be based on it was an average of $750 in fees that were waived. Is likely to be. Oh, I'm hearing that my headset is cutting out. Here, one. Okay. Can you guys hear me better now? Yes. I bet my batteries just were dying. I apologize for that. Mental note to charge them later. Thanks for letting me know. All right, so I'll just start from the beginning of this slide. Designers can submit up to 3 middle housing designs. Overall, we'll be picking 15 of those designs to be awarded $1,000 for each design. And then if you go ahead and submit the construction documents to create a pre-approved model plan, then the plan review fees for that process will be waived. And there's an average about $750 in fees for the ADUs. I would expect that middle housing fees will be greater than that. So it's an equivalent of 750 or more. We're launching today. Yay! And then you have 2 months, essentially, up until September 7th to work on and submit your designs. And at that point, we have a committee of about 10 people who will be reviewing all of those plans and picking the winners. City staff are not involved. It's all a committee of professionals. There's also a public survey component, which will be held in September, October, and that factors into the determination of winners. And there's a People's Choice Prize associated with that. Our award celebration will be in late October, potentially early November. And at that point, you have the option to submit your construction documents for the pre-approval. And then those pre-approved plans, once they're ready, will be displayed in the online library where Tucsonans can connect with you and purchase plans for use. And it's frequently asked, designers retain ownership and right of your plans. The city of Tucson is not purchasing these or influencing their use in any way other than compliance with code. So I'm going to take a detour from the competition for a moment and just speak a little bit more about pre-approved plans, what we mean, and just to distinguish that the design competition seeks conceptual plans, and that subsequent next step to create pre-approved model plans requires the full set of construction documents. So there's a little bit of a different level of effort involved. Also want to note the fees are waived for those who win the design competition, but anyone may submit construction documents. And based on the processes we've seen with the model plan library, both winning and non-winning designs are equally popular. And so if you don't win the design competition, but still want to be part of the library, we do encourage it. I'm not going to go through everything that's required, but that link there is available that dives into what's involved in submitting construction documents. So your documents will go through plan review, and that's where those building plan fees are waived. And then once approved, those pre-approved plans are good for 1 year. They can be extended annually until the building code is amended, in which case you'd have to resubmit to show compliance with the updated building code. When someone purchases a pre-approved plan from you and goes to submit an application, then they go through zoning review and would be requiring a site plan and such like this. And a frequently asked question, designers can make some minimal adjustments to pre-approved plans as long as they don't impact building code compliance. There's a lot of experts in the room about this topic, more so than I, and so I would defer to them and expect you to contact building safety staff to ask more questions on a case-by-case basis because it's pretty nuanced about what changes do and do not impact the building code compliance. Most changes require additional review and thus would no longer make it a pre-approved plan, but there is some wiggle room to be flexible for your clients. So in case it hasn't already been made abundantly clear, there's a lot of benefits to participating. You can win cash and you can have your plan fees waived. You'll be featured on our model plan library, which PDSD promotes and you can promote. And like I mentioned, I've seen random people in the community promoting. And so we all love free advertising. And then, of course, it's a way to connect and potentially purchase plans and ultimately that feel-good feeling of increasing housing availability in Tucson. And of course, like I said, designers retain your ownership and rights. So let's talk about the categories. So middle housing can help a wide range of households to meet their needs, and an ideal library of pre-approved plans will serve a variety of living arrangements, household sizes, etc. And so we have these categories to help users of the model plan library find ones that meet their needs. You can enter your design across multiple categories, and I just want to mention that designs can be a duplex, triplex, or a fourplex, but those would count as separate entries, as would separate bedroom counts. So if you have a duplex, that's 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms, those are 2 submissions. If you have a duplex and you double it into a fourplex, that's also 2 submissions. And there's a maximum of 3 per design team. The category list, and I'll go through some of these in more detail, are universal design and accessibility, which is, sorry, let me just scroll down to my notes here, but that's about making spaces accommodable to different people of different needs within the interior. Low cost and innovative is about affordability, affordable processes, a small footprint as well as family friendly, green and net zero, people's choice, student designer, and historic context sensitive. I just realized I was going to talk more about these in the slides, so I'm going to just keep going. So each of these have design guidelines, and we would expect that you clearly identify which category you fill and then use the narrative to highlight how your design meets the guidelines that I'm going to go through. And I'm going to have a variety of examples, but we would encourage you to be innovative. You don't have to stick to these design guidelines to a T. They're just meant to inspire and help give a sense of what we're looking for. But if you have an innovative approach, we would love to hear it. You can use the narrative to explain why you're doing what you're doing and how it serves the community. As I mentioned before, the selection committee will be using these design guidelines to help choose the winners. And we're not looking for maximizing each element, but more like a thoughtful balance with an overall goal of increasing quality housing in Tucson. And the selection committee will be both choosing the best designs overall and also balancing a range of duplexes, triplexes, and quadruplexes and categories. So we would encourage a variety of housing styles in the library in terms of like number of units. Okay, so accessibility and universal design is intending to meet accessibility requirements to support aging in place and those with physical disabilities. There's a lot of ways you can achieve this: ramped entryways, open floor plans, pocket doors, and variable kitchen counter heights. There's a lot of information online about more details. This is a resource from the Better Living Design group. They have a bit of a checklist as an opportunity to inspire. Again, not every aspect of the design needs to meet these accessibility guidelines, but these are things that you'll want to consider or incorporate to create middle housing that will be usable over time, multiple generations. Innovative construction and design is intended to make building possible for more Tucson residents by making them more affordable to build, using innovative and cost-effective building materials, ability to be constructed quickly and minimal labor costs, and using readily available materials. I do want to note that a contrast to ADUs, middle housing is not able to be a owner builder affidavit does not apply to middle housing per state law. So I just wanted to flag that difference between ADUs and middle housing. Aesthetics and contextual integration is about aesthetics that have broad appeal and function throughout many residential lots throughout Tucson. And I know Tucson's a very broad and dynamic city, so this can be achieved by designing something that would fit into multiple types of lots. On our website in the FAQ, we list the most common lot sizes for your inspiration, using a range of architectural styles, and then definitely designing with privacy in mind. An alternative to the broad appeal is a new category that we have for historic context sensitive. And so these are designs that are meant to complement local and national historic districts. And we'll be looking for adherence to the Secretary of Interior standards for historic rehabilitation. There's a link there that we can also drop in the chat and make sure is available in the FAQs. The main one there is about the fourth bullet on the slide of that, assuming existing dwellings remain on site, any additional new dwellings are going to be minimally visible or hidden from view and do not impact the integrity of the main building. That's the main Secretary of Interior standards that we'll be looking for. And we would recommend one of these three architectural styles that are very prevalent in historic neighborhoods, including gable, bungalow, or adobe styles, but you can choose which one works best for you. We would be looking for adherence to the HPZ or NPZ design guidelines to the extent possible, and also height being a single story. And just to note, creating this historic context sensitive category does not supersede local design guidelines and the zoning review process in HPZs and NPZs. And it also does not guarantee maintaining contributing status, but it is meant to help be a little bit more amenable and be site plans that accommodate an existing dwelling to reduce the need for building on a vacant site and things like this. Next category is sustainable energy and water efficiency, which is to increase our goal of sustainable buildings by incorporating green buildings and features. And there's a lot of ways you can do this. There's 3 examples on the slide, but of course, you're not limited to these 3. There's so many ways to be sustainable, especially as technology is constantly changing. Would definitely love to see whatever ideas you come up with here. This is a new category, student designer. So we want to encourage U of A or other students to participate. And so if 3 or more students or student teams enter, then we'll have a student designer prize category where those submissions will be ranked against each other, as well as being ranked against all the others in all the other categories. So you'll just need to provide proof of enrollment at the U of A or recent graduation. And as I said, if we get 3 or more, then not only will you compete against all the others, but you'll have your own little smaller pool to compete against. People's Choice is the result of the online survey, which will be shared in late September, early October. The link will be sent to all participants once it's live, so that you can share it in your community, help spread the word about middle housing, and solicit support for your design. The results of the People's Choice Award will be factored into the rest of the selection, and it'll also be its own standalone award. So I'm going to pause, take a sip of water, a lot of talking. So We will have city staff do an initial feasibility check of the semi-finalist designs to just ensure that everything is meeting code and that it is feasible to build. We'll be looking at building height. If it's a multi-story, whether you used privacy mitigation, we'll be looking for basics in the residential building code and things like this to ensure that, like I said, what you're submitting is feasible on the ground. And then there's a lot of resources to assist in addition to the website, which will have all the information like rules, FAQs, the housing types in Tucson guide that I mentioned that helps contrast middle housing to ADUs and regular housing. We have a report from the U of A Drockman Institute on site plans looking at how a fourplex would work on the most common parcel sizes in Tucson with and without an existing dwelling. So I would look to that for some of that feasibility that I mentioned. And of course, the recording of this presentation will be available online. But we're also going to be having an in-person design feedback session. The date is not yet determined. It'll be early to mid-August. So halfway through the competition, this will be an opportunity to drop in and get feedback on your designs from PDS staff, architects, and designers. We're partnering with AIA Southern Arizona on this so that you'll have some expertise to kind of bounce some ideas off of and get some midway through the competition feedback on what you're submitting. And then, of course, you're all part of some professional networks, and the AARP has a lot of publications on middle housing as well as universal design. So, any questions? I've seen a variety in the chat. Where should we begin? Cesar, do you want to flag some that have not been responded to?
Sure. So Gustavo asked, how is the city going to incentivize the winners to make the CD sets to become model plans? So for example, if you have 10 ADU winners and only 6 become model plans, the goal is to have all 15 winners of middle housing to become a model plan.
Yeah, that's a great question, Gustavo. Thank you. So we're looking into this. We've heard this feedback before that an additional incentive is necessary because the additional construction documents is an extra step. And so we're evaluating. We have a potential alternative source of funding, but we haven't gotten through all of the steps to be able to say concretely if and what that incentive would be. But we do hear that that is something that's desirable. The goal of having 15 model plans is like going to be a combination of both winners and non-winners of the design competition. So there's a lot of flexibility there. So thank you. And feel free to, we will definitely be following up with you once we have a plan for what we know, like when we know more about this.
Yeah. There was also a question about how does the accessible home ordinance come into effect when we are designing? And I think Clayton answered that in the chat. There was also another question of, can you explain why is owner builder affidavit not permitted for middle housing?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, staff who know more about this, but my understanding is that an ADU, you can argue, is likely to be used by somebody in somebody's household. Whereas middle housing, if you're building up to 4 units, you're likely going to be renting those out. And an owner builder affidavit is only allowed to be used on your own like personal home and homes of like on your property that'll be staying within your family. And so that is why an owner builder affidavit is not allowed, is not applicable to middle housing. And chime in if I got the nuance wrong there. And it's a state law.
Amanda, I'm going to chime in because it doesn't look like anybody from the city is, but it's always been city policy that if you're living in a portion of it, then you're allowed to build it. So hopefully Clayton or Mac, you can correct me if that isn't correct.
This is Clayton. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. On this topic, we'll look into it further and engage the state to ensure that we're in line with state statute.
Going ahead with the next question, Scott asked, if the design is created for a south-facing lot, but someone wants to build it on a north-facing lot, If window locations, overhangs, etc., are modified to reflect this change, will the plan review fees still be waived?
I'm not sure if I heard the question right. Can you say who asked it so I can read it?
That's from Scott Trombetta.
Okay, thanks, Scott. I see the question now.
Can I answer that question? I mean, we just as a designer perspective, we build that into our model plan thinking, knowing that sometimes sites will require different privacy situations, views. So we design our windows with the intention that they might need to get smaller, they might need to become a clerestory window. So I think that while you're designing, you kind of need to think through that strategy of like how you would accommodate if a window moves down the wall or changes sizes. And then you take care of those things on a site plan. And so far, we've had a lot of success with that process with the city on the site reviews.
Logan's got his hand up, but I can have a written question after that.
Okay, go for it, Logan.
Yeah, so some of my questions are a little specific to my thought processes on this, but I would really appreciate some thoughts. But like if looking at infill as part of the project, and if we're going to design a unit that has a blank wall so they can be stacked, similar to like our barrio or our Mercado district, do we allow that? Like, what happens with a party wall? Are they individual units that are allowed to sh like touch walls? Um, and then a separate question is we had discussed lot split by density with the middle housing code. Um, is that something that we should be considering rather than $1 million development, individual houses that can be sold off? Is that anything that should be considered for this competition, or is the code not going to be like that at the time?
Mhm. As for your first question, I'll refer to some staff from building safety to answer. I mean, as I understand your question, middle housing can be attached or detached. And so if you want to design it with a future attachment in mind, then I would encourage that. But go ahead, Clayton.
Yeah, quick pause and Clayton then. So like if we were to say we're building a unit that's built and designed to be stacked, so it could be a single unit or share a wall, or not share a wall, but have the walls touching and have it be a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex, so that there's more flexibility in an individual plan, would that be allowed? And would that be because it would be just a party wall, not like the structure changing, because otherwise we would have to make four submissions for any design if it's a unit that can be stacked.
Okay, so let me just address a couple of things. Number one, a party wall exists between two units. So if you're designing a single unit that has a fire rated wall, that wouldn't qualify as a party wall. But you can design a model plan that has a fire rated assembly on one side or both sides that would allow it to either be classified as a townhouse or some sort of other dwelling in an attached format. However, that wall would always need to carry that fire rating design regardless of its configuration. So to build it as a model, it would need to be constructed the same every single time, which means that you wouldn't have an option of having a bedroom window on that side because that bedroom window cannot, be replaced with a solid fire rated wall, blocking its attachment to another assembly. So in short, yes, you can design a model that has the capability of being stacked or directly built adjacent to another unit. But the key is going to be ensuring that side or sides of the building are constructed the same every single time.
Okay, and then the second part of the question is, so if we're building like a budding of the same unit, is there ever, like in the model housing, we had discussed one of the biggest priorities for a lot of the community was that these wouldn't just be developments for developers, but that they could be split into single family starter home style projects, like lot split by density, 4 units on an R2 lot with 1,000 square foot each. Is that an intention? Is that something the city is working on? Does that seem like it'll be possible?
Yes, so what Logan is asking about is a code amendment that we talked about a lot when we were in the community input phase of middle housing, wanting to see more options for home ownership as well as rentals. And so we didn't have a chance to get to it at last fall due to the state timelines, but we are currently working on a middle housing subdivision process. And the details of that are part of a zoning amendment project called Code Tucson. And I'm happy to speak in detail about it. But yes, we are creating a process that would allow you to split your lot if you have four or fewer and achieve, as long as the overall density is the same, is maintained of 4 units per whatever minimum lot size in your zone, then as well as many other things being considered, yes, the short answer is yes. We're working towards it. And that will be part of, I believe, Planning Commission in August, September era, and then moving to mayor and council by the end of the year. Great. Sharia, do you want to go?
Yeah, I just have a question. I mean, just about the timeline and like, right? So the last, um, the last, it was hard to work through, right? Like you guys are barely unrolling out the code, and I work through a lot of these issues with clients directly, right? Working through the kinks. And then you have this competition where we haven't had that time, right, to work through any of the code issues. And you're going to be updating again now with this subdivision process which will affect, right, the way you think about the plans, the way you think about design. So I just feel like it always feels too rushed. Again, the process just ends up to me weeding out people who are actually doing the work. And then you honor people who then don't even follow through with CDs. Like there needs to be some, I feel like, more balanced approach of like good intentions and then like meeting people where they're at. And I think I know you have this grant and timeline and deliverables, but maybe I don't know. I just feel like that needs more consideration.
Noted. Yeah, I really appreciate that feedback that is seeming coming like really quickly on the heels. It's true. The ADU competition was a year, I think, after we had implemented the adopted codes. So I really appreciate that feedback. You're right, there's not that much that I can do about it at this moment, but we'll certainly keep that into consideration. And I'd like to make myself available for any questions that people have in the next couple of months while they're working on this. Logan, do you have something to say in response? Otherwise, I don't want the chat to take second tier here. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond and say one thing that we found is that we put together from deciding to enter to entering, we did it within a month, just using nights and weekends. And the original submission is not a CD set. It was a pretty rudimentary massing and approximate idea. And we did change the plan through the process of getting the CD set based on how the code adapted or how we came to understand the code as time went on. So I think one of the things is like enter your best design possible. That I remember the entries, some were hand sketches, some were more developed, and a variety won. So I think like if you have an idea of how middle housing as an expert building in the community, like what is best practices to universally apply as much across the city, you can get a pretty good idea, pretty rudimentary that still gets the concept across. And that's how it worked for us.
Thanks, Logan. So
All
Sarah, is there
right.
a chat question? Oh, go ahead.
Sure, we got a few.
Thanks.
So one, can you please explain why the owner builder affidavit is not permitted for middle housing?
Okay, I think we addressed that one.
Oh,
We
sorry.
will have to follow up a little bit more.
Sorry. So next one, do you guys need 3D model or just digital blueprints for types of design?
Great question. We'll get to what's involved in the submission next.
Awesome. Next one was, in order to submit into the historical context category, the existing home has to remain?
Correct. Although there are certainly vacant lots in the historic zones and districts, in order for this category to apply, you're assuming that there's an existing home and that existing home will remain intact and be the focal point on the lot.
Last one from the chat. Will the middle housing and ADU libraries be separate things? Through practice in recent months, the Middle Housing Code is essentially replacing the need for ADU zoning in most cases.
They will be merged, and it's true that there's a lot of overlap between middle housing and ADUs in the code, and that's something that we'll be looking at more in the coming future of how do we tease these apart more effectively. But short answer to your question, the middle housing and ADU plans will be on the same library.
That's it from the chat.
Okay, thank you,
I'm
Cesar.
sorry, I can't find my hand to raise my hand, but can I ask one more question going back to the historic category that you just were mentioning? Your description talked about maybe looking at those designs in terms of their material palette, things like that. We have found that when like the historic neighborhoods are a smaller percentage of our city and a smaller percentage of the customer base that we have, and some of the exterior finishes can be modified without a lot of effort in the permitting, like the site review process. So they're just minor modifications. Um, so they can still, so the designs might not meet your your design competition category, but they still meet like we can still get them approved in historic neighborhoods. So could somebody still submit into that category just with a narrative of how the design can be easily altered to meet those standards?
Yeah, I would accept that for sure. And then Valerie, if you could follow up with me over email with your question and example, I can bring it to the historic preservation officer and get her take on making the guidelines a little bit more clear and realistic,
Yeah, because some of
if
these
needed.
things, some of your bullet points just feel really site specific. And when you're designing a model like this, it is important to think about flexibility
Mhm.
and how they accommodate various sites. So even the historic rehab standards, I'm not sure are going to be really helpful to the design process thinking in this way. And I would hate to see it be like, oh, this one's Adobe, so it gets to win that category, which is fine. It can, but that may be the outcome.
Thanks for the feedback. Shreya, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly.
It's Sharia. That's okay.
Shreya.
Yeah, just one quick question is similar to Logan's. My understanding too of like the three different submissions, right, is that a duplex is a difference, right? The housing unit, right, is what change is where the line is. But then some of us are thinking about it like similarly, like a series of plans, right, where like you have a module because I already have a series design that like it grows by a 12-foot bay and like right it's kind of the same I plan and the same idea it the unit type is changing but the elevations all go together all match it's part of a series. Is there a way we could submit as a like similar to the way major home developers do, right? You have like your and the way other finalists had presented their concepts, it's like it's a series. It's not really about the housing unit type.
Mhm.
Is that a different, could we have that flexibility in the design competition to think about it that way?
I appreciate that feedback, and I'll have to look into it and get back to you, and if we're able to modify. But what our thinking is that there are some significant changes from the building code perspective, there's a significant difference between a duplex and a triplex and a fourplex, even if they're built in series. And in order to be fair and equitable across all competitors, as well as city staff and how our systems work, we would view those as separate types of model plans. But your question, I think, is more about like the design competition and whether a series could be included as one. And I'll have to look into that. There might be a little bit of a distinction between the amount of competition entries versus if you were to actually submit these as pre-approved models, then they would be looked at separately. And we'll have to tease that out a little bit more. And I appreciate the feedback. But as it is now, I think a duplex, a triplex, and a fourplex would be looked at as 3 submissions as it is written now. And thanks for bringing that to my attention.
Okay. Uh, questions that popped up since we've been chatting. Let's see here. One was, can you confirm if middle housing has square footage threshold the same way ADUs do? And I think Valerie answered that to say they don't.
Yeah,
And then
it would,
another was,
yeah, it would just be lot coverage in the development standards of the UDC.
and then read the owner builder. I believe the owner builder requirement is a waiver. Okay, that's more of an answer. Let's see, co-op casas specializing in cottage courts utilizing middle housing rules. These aren't part of the design content other than submitting individual units. Is that correct?
Yeah, so does cottage court impact sorry, let me start over. Are cottage courts considered middle housing? They are more, the middle housing definition is more about the number of sites, units. The configuration on the site doesn't really apply. And so if you're building a cottage court that's 5 or more units, it would be considered a commercial development and not be fitting under the middle housing definition as we have it at the city. But you could certainly build 4 units in an approximation of a cottage court style, and that would still be considered middle housing.
That looks like we've caught up.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk about actually submitting. And I really want to really appreciate everybody's thoughtful questions because it really helps us create a better product and process. And I think it speaks to like care and attention when people give feedback. So just as an aside, thank you so much. All right, so we will have a submission form on our website. IT is working on this and will get it to us soon, and we will announce that when it's available online. I'm sure a handful of you are ready to submit tomorrow. I'm so sorry you'll have to wait, but you have 2 months, so we have plenty of time. A complete submission will have the following items: an application form, which is basically contact info, and a project description and design narrative. Design narrative we've mentioned. It's basically explaining how the design guidelines are addressed in your application. And I'm noticing that I needed to update Casita on the slide. My apologies. You'll need a floor plan, building sections, building elevations, 3D views. This was a question in the chat earlier. Yes, we do want to see 3D views. A description of the major construction materials and mechanical systems. A sample site plan is only required if you're seeking that historic context sensitive design category because we need to see the existing unit and how your proposed units interface with that existing unit. Otherwise, a sample site plan is not required, it's optional. You can certainly provide other optional visuals that help depict your project. If you are a student designer, we'll need to see proof of enrollment and we'll need to see a signed memorandum of agreement, which is available online. It's basically explaining that you're submitting these designs for the purposes of the competition. And an overview of the timeline. So AARP announced the winners just in the last week of June. So we are opening this competition today. And we will have our in-person feedback session in early to mid-August. And then you'll have another month after that for submitting your designs. If you submit your designs early, we will do our best to give it a preliminary look and at least make sure that all of the previous items are included. And if something is missing, we will do our best to let you know, but we won't be reviewing any submissions until after the close of the competition. We will have in September into October is when we will have the People's Choice voting as well as the selection committee reviewing your designs with an intent to announce the winners before the end of October, maybe bleeding into November as needed. And then in December and on, those who choose to will have the option to submit construction documents. And I believe the fees are waived. I'll have to confirm. There's a timeline of when the fees are eligible to be waived, and I believe it's a year, but don't quote me on that. I will have to fact check. But it's the same as it was last time. So I think, assuming my memory is correct, you'll have a year to get those construction documents submitted and still have the fees waived. So that's it. We will certainly be reaching out when the submission portal is open, and we'll be also letting you know when this recording is posted online, and as well as information about that in-person session. And so, okay, I see a couple of other questions in the chat. Are there out-of-state examples? I'm not sure I understand this question. Are there Tucson locations that are similar samples of what you want? I think there's a lot of great examples all across Tucson of middle housing, and there's great examples from outside of our city. Middle housing has been permitted in other cities for a long time, so we definitely encourage you to draw from what you think works and what you think would work well in our city, as long as you're meeting those design guidelines. And also, anyone can submit to this competition. They do not have to be a Tucson or Southern Arizona designer. So if you know of people who do good work from outside of the city, there's no limit on who can enter. Page limit or formatting requirements. Thanks for this question. There's no page limit, but I believe it's a 20 megabyte file size, and we're looking for things to be in a PDF. And I should also mention, it says so online, but please remove any identifying features from your submission. We'll have that information in the application form, but in the PDF that you submit with the floor plan, etc., we would prefer not to have any logos or names so that our selection committee can be as unbiased as possible when they're reviewing the entries. Any other questions? You're welcome. And thank you so much for participating. Does that mean we need to remove title blocks with our info? Yes, please. You can submit something that has your information on it if you'd like, but I will be asking you to resubmit without anything that says who is the creator behind the submission, so that when the selection committee reviews, they are as unbiased as possible. Certainly, once the designers are selected, and especially if in your library, full credit will be given to your designs. I believe strongly in giving credit where credit is due. I can't guarantee that the submission link will be available next week, but I am going to follow up with IT every chance I get, and we'll post it as soon as it's ready. All right. I'm going to stay on the call. I'm happy to continue to take questions, but we are officially done. Please go enjoy your lunch. And thank you so much for coming and supporting PDSD and middle housing in our community. I'm really happy that you all showed up and are interested in participating. And please reach out. Let me go to the last slide. Grab my email address. It follows the Tucson formula, amanda.smith@tucsonaz.gov if you have any questions. And then I would really recommend, if you haven't already, signing up for the PDSD newsletter so you can get all of those updates. Yes, let the games begin. Are AI generated designs allowed or only original work? That is a really great question, and I'm not entirely sure how to answer that. I don't know, honestly, if we'd be able to discern. I think if it meets the building code and zoning code and passes that initial feasibility check, then there's no ways that we wouldn't be able to accept it. It is a new generation, yes. And thanks, Valerie, for asking and bringing that up, because that's an important consideration that we're all navigating in all spheres of our work right now.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm. So feel free to stay if you have questions or want to hear other people's questions. Go ahead, Logan.
Yeah, this one's just for fun since we have your time. With the parking waivers, is that generally just included? So, background is that we have the ADU in the model plan library. We've had permits make it through the city in as little as 15 days. So, thank you for the model plan library. That's a huge incentive for
That's
anybody
great.
considering entering, is you can get a permit within 15 days. I think that's really great. With the parking waivers, if we're using a parking waiver on one of these plans, is that generally included in the submission process? Would it fit within that 15 window, or is that an additional things like a DDR variance or something that takes more time?
Well, that's a really good question. It would be included as part of the zoning review. And so I don't know that it would, it's an interesting thing about how that it would interplay with your design competition submission, because of course you'd want to leave room on the site for parking or maximize the space. Not every of a large majority of parcels in Tucson are within the parking waiver area. And you can go onto the Middle Housing AZ website. We have an interactive tool that shows you the areas that are parking waiver eligible or not. And it's like, because of the extensive bike network that DTM has planned, there's quite a large area that is eligible. So I
Yeah,
think I lost track of
I
your question.
No,
It
that
would,
was pretty much my question. I guess I was
okay.
thinking when we were doing the early submissions for ADUs, we were obligated to arbitrarily put parking. There's always enough room for parking, or generally people want to guarantee there's parking if they're putting it for a rental or something like that. So I was
Yes.
just making sure that if the parking waiver is being used and if it's eligible, almost as just a way to bypass the complexity of having to draw blocks or like show how it's going to fit. If we can show that the parking works with a reduction to simplify the process, then I would probably go that route often. And I just want to make sure it wouldn't delay a submission.
I don't know that it necessarily would. It would be part of the zoning review if they are or are not eligible for that waiver. It's not an extra process the way an IPP is, individualized parking plan and things like that. I know site plans are not a requirement, but if a site plan is presented, will we be looking for the landscape standards? You're right, it's not a requirement for the competition unless you're seeking that historic context sensitive. And I think that we would be looking for it as part of that feasibility of whether or not code is being met. Thanks, Gustavo. I think I'll just give another plug for the U of A Drockman Institute's report, which looked at sample site plans across a variety of common sizes in the city. And they incorporated landscaping, fire access, utilities, et cetera, to show like transportation access. They looked at variations that have an alley, do not have an alley. So I would really recommend you check that out. The document is on the Middle Housing website under design competition, under resources. So I think pretty easy to find, but let me know if you need it. Samsung SM, go ahead with your question. If you want to unmute yourself.
Oh,
Go ahead, I can hear you.
oh, okay. Okay, sorry, I didn't. It should be Edgar. No, it's son. So I emailed you like a 4 unit. Um, it's like L shape. It looks like a ADU. Um, what is I guess what's I know the competition of 25K Tucson one through ARP, but what is the main point of this? Is it to get people kind of building small units also?
Yeah. So the main point is to populate a model plan library, which we already have for accessory dwelling units. And we want to add middle
Mhm.
housing designs. Now that this new set of code is available to the community, not everybody knows how to build model housing, not, middle housing. Not everybody wants to spend the time designing it for themselves. And so they find the model plan library really useful for a minimum of inspiration, if not actually purchasing plans and building. And so I think it helps people conceptualize what we're talking about. And also, it helps people learn more that middle housing is even an option now, because like Sharia mentioned, um, it's still new. It's still new in Tucson. And so we're just trying to also get the word out. That's a secondary goal. Thanks for asking.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions at this time? I know that was a lot of information and a lot to digest. All right, sounds good. I'm going to stay on another minute or so because if you're an introvert like me, you need a little bit more time to process. But I really do appreciate everyone who stuck around. You're welcome, Taryn.
Amanda, did you see my comment about adding the Drachman document to your competition website?
Yes, it is on the competition
Okay.
website as of yesterday, and there's a resources section that includes the Drachman report, the housing types guide that teases apart ADUs, middle housing, and sleeping quarters. The audience for that housing types guide is really like your average citizen in Tucson who's trying to make sense of what they want and what it would entail. But I think it's really useful for professionals as well for having a quick reference of the details, differences. And then there's a few other resources on there as well.
Okay, sounds good.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Yeah, of course. Logan, did you have something? I saw you went off mute.
Yeah, I was just thinking about well, two things. One is a comment, like if you're still unsure about if you're going to submit outside of the model plan library, because of being in the model plan library, you'll get an audience of people that reach out about different projects. So it's worth entering the competition. And then maybe I guess some of my questions are about like I've seen designs that would match the historic intentions that are similar to like an Armory Park or West University 2-story, 2 units above, 2 units below. If
Mm-hmm.
we feel like we have a compelling argument where it does not fit within the parameters you have, but we feel like it fits the intention quite well, is there going to be any exception, or is it pretty rigid within the guidelines you have?
Yeah, I think that's similar to Valerie's question, and I really appreciate it. Definitely, if you would like to submit something, explain it in the narrative. And if you have a sense of this early enough, send me an email with this is what I'm thinking, this is why I think it meets historic context. And we can do our best to give you some preliminary guidance on whether we think it would meet the criteria. Um, I know it's a vague answer. And then if you want to email me, like now, just as I said with Valerie, with suggestions on how to revise the criteria for the historic sensitive, we did do our best to make it as broad as possible, since if you build an HPZs, you're familiar with the development zone context, which is very site specific. And so we were striving for something that would be more broad, but maybe we didn't quite hit the mark, especially since in Tucson, you've got your HPZs and NPZs, but then you also have all your other national districts. And we would want this to be appealing to those as well. Even within the historic areas of town, there's still a lot of diversity. And so we're open to feedback on how to revise the submission design guidelines, especially like the sooner the better, so that we can get that updated in the next week or so.
You know, I honestly think you guys could be more vague and just say, just give the designer agency over, does this match and align with our historic Tucson fabric? Because trying to meet these Secretary of Interior standards and a model plan just feels a little arduous and irrelevant when it's again the site specific nature of the work. Like part of that process, the historic review process won't happen during the model review process anyway. It will happen during the site review. So I think it could be as open as, does this align with a historic Tucson fabric? And please identify that or show that, so that would be my personal opinion.
Thanks for that feedback. Yeah, again, the most important part of the Secretary of Interior standards is that the main existing house is left intact and let me remains the focal point. I'll have to look and see if there's just that one that we need to pull out. But I do know that in order to work in these zones, they would need to comply with those 10 standards. And so it's sort of
But that'll be, again, that's looked at during the site review, not during the model plan review.
correct. But the goal is to have these designs work in historic zones. And so it's sort of like we wouldn't want to get in the way of their effectiveness in the future by having too lax of standards now. But I recognize your feedback, absolutely, and I'm going to have a conversation with our HPO about it.
I mean, historic is about the elevations. Everyone wants to see the elevations, and that's what they really care about, and that's design.
Elevations.
Yeah, those are what the historic really cares about.
And often though, as it relates to the street facing, like what people see from the street. So again, that's a very site specific, and you wouldn't enter into any historic review process until you had a specific site anyway.
I think it's in some ways less complicated than I think it can get very complicated. I think it can be very simple. Generally, with most of the HPZ or NPZ, it's just double hung windows and sometimes some sort of depth on the facade. But it can get very specific. And so I think if you're really trying to appeal to the HPZ and NPZ in the city, then it's universally pretty much double hung windows. HPZ can request different things based on the property that it is going into, which then is very site specific, as you're saying, Valerie. But otherwise, I think Shay is correct that it's usually just elevations presented. And so if there's a house in front of that elevation, then that's how it'll change if you're going through some reviews.
Thanks for sharing your perspectives. It's all very helpful for me. I think unless there's anything else, I know my to-dos and I really appreciate all your feedback and ideas, and you know where to reach me if something else comes up.